This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming to our first Emory Meets Emory. We're going to talk about the Obama presidency and the midterm elections, and we're going to be very informal. I am Dorothy Brown. I'm a law professor. I am one of the 4 co-leaders of the Race and Difference Initiative.
Yeah, well, it's been a while.
You can find us on the web at www.rdi.emory.edu. I wanted to tell you about an upcoming event. Next Wednesday, Professor Michelle Alexander, from the professor of law at Ohio State University, is coming to talk about her new book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. She's going to be doing a seminar from 3 to 5 p.m. on Wednesday, November 3rd, and from 7 to 9 p.m., a lecture and panel discussion, and that will be in the Center for Ethics, room 102. So with that, we will proceed to our panel. I'm going to speak briefly about the Bush tax cuts that are expiring and what impact they're going to have, in my view, on the election. And then I guess we can start from my right and then proceed onwards. Each of the speakers will introduce themselves, and after they speak for about 5 or 6 minutes, we're going to open it up to a conversation that the panelists will hopefully then have with each other, and then open it up to you for your thoughtful and insightful questions and comments. The Bush tax cuts, which are expiring at the end of this year, I think are not having that much of an impact on the election per se, i.e. different candidates are running on tax cuts. However, I do think there's going to be a significant impact of the midterm elections when we have this lame duck session of Congress, and what is it that's going to happen with the Bush tax cut. So from the people I've talked to in DC who are watching it, they expect to see either a 1-year or a 3-year term put on the Bush tax cuts, or put another way, they expect it to not expire for at least 1 year or 3 years. Why 1 or 3? Because the compromise with the Obama administration that don't want to see the Bush cuts extended for everyone is going to be, we'll have it taken up in a non-election year, which is why the 1 year or the 3 years. So what we expect to happen is the Bush tax cuts for everyone will be extended for either a year or 3 years, whereas the Obama administration would like to see the Bush tax cuts extended for everyone permanently, but for those who make $200,000 or $250,000 or more, to have the Bush tax cuts expire. So back in August and September, there was a lot of noise about the Bush tax cuts, and the administration made arguments about, you don't want tax relief for the rich, which went nowhere, which is why I think you didn't see it rear its head that much in these midterm elections. So I'm going to end my remarks there.
Hi there, my name's Donnie Ryder. I'm the chair of the Political Science Department here at Emory. And Professor Brown has asked me to say a few words about the first 2 years of the Obama administration and foreign policy. I have no doubt that this is by far the least significant topic that we will discuss amongst the panel today. Foreign policy has really taken a back seat in American politics over the last 2 years. You'll notice that in the midterm election campaigns, everyone is screaming about everything except for foreign policy, which strikes me as somewhat strange, given that American soldiers and servicemen are still dying overseas at quite a rapid clip, and the stakes still remain high in both Iraq and Afghanistan. That being said, let me talk about 5 different areas of foreign policy which have arguably been the most salient of the Obama administration. The first one I want to talk about is relations with Russia. Relations with Russia in the Bush administration had deteriorated, and when Hillary Clinton came on as Secretary of State, she said we need to push the reset button on relations with Russia. And there I think we've made some progress. Probably the most significant accomplishment was the signature of the new START arms control treaty, which promises to substantially reduce U.S. and Russian strategic nuclear weapons. This agreement just got a positive vote in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. A publication of the United States Air Force just had an editorial coming out in favor of this agreement, meaning there's military support for it. So I think the chances that it will be ratified by the U.S. Senate are relatively good. A second area I want to talk about is relations with China. One thing I think that everyone is becoming increasingly aware of is that China is not going away. There's an article in the New York Times today indicating that China just built the fastest supercomputer. And every other Thomas Friedman column in the New York Times talks about how China is a tremendous threat. I don't think we've really dealt with the long-term threat that China poses in terms of its economic and technological ascent. We are trying to get them to allow their currency to float to address some trade imbalances, but we have not made as much progress as we would like. Next, let me mention Iraq. The good news in Iraq is that the success that we attained after the 2007 surge has remained. We still have relatively low levels of violence, and there are other indicators in Iraq that things are going well. For example, electricity production is up, violence is down, and so forth. U.S. troops have wound down. The U.S. presence is decreased. Probably the biggest disappointment is the lack of political progress in Iraq, in the sense that the factions in Iraq have not come together to consensually agree on a new political order, which would, among other things, make decisions about the distribution of Iraq's oil wealth. Fourth, there is Iran. We continue to be concerned about Iran's nuclear weapons program. The Obama administration has tried to escalate economic sanctions against Iran. A new round was passed just recently. Unfortunately, Iran has not yet done what the international community wants it to do in terms of abandoning its alleged nuclear weapons program. But beyond economic sanctions, I don't think we have any effective tools in our toolkit. And then last is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is, I think, as we all know, not going terribly well. There are now approximately 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Violence continues to escalate, and there's really no end in sight. Probably the best bet is the arrival of David Petraeus. He is going to apply very roughly the strategy he used in Iraq in Afghanistan, which is to start negotiating with many of the individuals and groups who were engaged in violence against the United States. So I think he's going to try to bring the Taliban and maybe al-Qaeda into the conversation to craft some kind of political compromise which would provide enough of a fig leaf to permit eventual American withdrawal.